I want you to do something for me before I start. Walk into your kitchen just for a moment and look at the pan you used most recently. Look at the inside surface. Is the coating scratched, flaking, or worn down in places where the spatula has scraped it for years? Now open the cabinet where you keep your leftovers. Look at those plastic containers stacked on top of each other. Are any of them cloudy, warped, or stained orange from tomato sauce that was reheated inside them? I'm not asking you to throw anything away yet. I'm asking you to look, because what you're looking at may matter more for the long-term health of your heart and your arteries than you've ever been told. Here's the truth that took medical research a long time to confirm. Even if you are eating beautifully, even if your plate is full of vegetables and lean protein and olive oil and everything your cardiologist would smile about, the vessel you cooked that food in and the container you stored it in may be quietly contributing to the very condition you're trying to prevent. Vascular inflammation, arterial stiffening. These are gradual processes that, over time, can increase your risk of cardiovascular disease. Your food may be healthy. Your cooking method may be the part that nobody warned you about. My name is Dr. Marcus Reeve, and approximately in the next 20 minutes, I'm going to talk about what the research actually shows about scratched nonstick pans, certain plastic storage containers, and the chemical compounds they can release into your food. I'll try to explain the biological mechanisms in plain language, what the published studies suggest, and most importantly, what practical changes you can make today that don't require expensive replacements or extreme lifestyle shifts. Before I start, the information presented in this video is for general health education, grounded in peer-reviewed research. It is not intended as individual medical advice and should not substitute a consultation with your own physician who understands your unique health history, medications, and specific conditions. For any pre-existing cardiovascular issues, please consult your doctor regarding significant changes rather than solely depending on video content. If this is the kind of honest, practical conversation you've been looking for, type yes in the comments. It helps this video reach others who deserve to know what most kitchen advice has been missing. Now let's start. For decades, the conversation about heart health has focused almost entirely on what you put on your plate. Salt, saturated fat, sugar, processed foods, all of that matters. None of it is being challenged here. But there's a layer of the story that has been quietly building in the research literature over the past 15 years, and it has very little to do with the ingredients themselves. It has to do with what's happening between the food and the pan. When you cook, heat doesn't just transform your ingredients. It activates the surface that's touching them. If that surface is intact and stable, nothing meaningful transfers into your food. If that surface is damaged, degraded, or made of materials that break down under heat, small amounts of chemical compounds can migrate from the cookware into the food itself. You then eat those compounds. Your body absorbs some of them. And over years, depending on the compound and the frequency of exposure, those substances can contribute to processes that affect your cardiovascular system. This isn't speculation. This is documented in peer-reviewed studies from institutions including Harvard School of Public Health, the National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences, and several major European research bodies. The two categories I want to focus on today are the ones with the strongest accumulated evidence and the most practical relevance for everyday kitchens. The first is damaged nonstick cookware, particularly older nonstick pans and any nonstick surface with visible scratches, flaking, or wear. The second is certain plastic food storage containers, especially when they are used for hot food, microwaved, or reused well past their intended lifespan. Let's look at each one carefully. Nonstick cookware became popular in the 1960s because it solved a real problem. Food doesn't stick, cleanup is easy, and you can cook with less oil. For decades, the chemistry that made this possible was based on a family of compounds called per- and polyfluoroalkyl substances, often shortened to PFAS. The most well-known of these were PFOA and PFOS. Here's what changed. Beginning in the early 2000s, research from the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency and several independent studies began documenting that PFOA could persist in the human body for years and was associated with elevated cholesterol, changes in immune function, and increased markers of cardiovascular risk. By 2015, major manufacturers had voluntarily phased PFOA out of new nonstick cookware production in the United States, and the compound was largely eliminated from the supply chain by 2020 under regulatory agreements. This is important to say clearly. New nonstick pans manufactured after 2015 in the United States and the European Union generally do not contain PFOA. The chemistry has changed. But two real concerns remain, and these are the ones I want you to understand. The first concern is older cookware. If your nonstick pan was purchased before 2015, or if its age is uncertain, it might still contain the original PFOA-based coating. And if that coating is scratched, chipped, or flaking, those small fragments can end up in your food. Research published in the journal Environmental Health Perspectives has documented detectable levels of PFAS compounds in the bloodstream of populations with regular exposure to these older materials, with measurable associations to elevated LDL cholesterol and markers of vascular inflammation. The second concern applies even to newer cookware. When any non-stick surface is heated to very high temperatures, generally above 500 degrees Fahrenheit or about 260 degrees Celsius, the coating itself can begin to break down regardless of its formulation. This is more likely to happen when an empty pan is left preheating on high for several minutes, or when a pan is used at maximum heat for extended cooking. The fumes released at these temperatures have been associated with a temporary flu-like condition in humans called polymer fume fever, and they are well documented as lethal to small pet birds in the home. Now, what does this mean for your heart and your arteries? Research from Harvard School of Public Health, including a 2022 study published in the journal Hypertension, found that women with higher blood levels of PFAS compounds had a meaningfully elevated risk of developing high blood pressure compared to women with lower levels. Additional studies, including work published in the Journal of the American Heart Association, have linked higher PFAS exposure to increased markers of arterial inflammation, which is one of the foundational processes in the development of atherosclerosis, the hardening and narrowing of the arteries. The mechanism is thought to involve several pathways. PFAS compounds can interfere with cholesterol metabolism in the liver. They appear to promote low-grade inflammation in blood vessel walls, and they have been shown in laboratory studies to affect the function of cells that line the inside of arteries, the endothelial cells, which are critical for healthy blood flow. This is not a story about panic. PFAS exposure from cookware is one of many environmental factors, and the body is remarkably resilient. But for adults over 60, whose cardiovascular systems have already been doing decades of work, reducing avoidable exposure is one of the more practical things you can do. If you're getting value from this, a quick like helps this video reach others who may be cooking on the same pans they've had for 15 years. No pressure, just appreciated. Let me give you a clear, practical framework rather than a vague warning. First, examine your current nonstick pans honestly. If you see visible scratches, flaking, peeling, or worn patches where the metal is starting to show through, that pan has reached the end of its safe life. This isn't about aesthetics. A scratched nonstick surface is one whose protective layer is no longer intact, and small fragments can transfer into your food. The pan has served you well. It's time to retire it. Second, if you don't know how old a nonstick pan is, and especially if it might predate 2015, the safest assumption is to replace it. You don't need to do this all at once. Replace pans gradually as your budget allows, beginning with the one you use most often. Third, when you do replace, you have several genuinely good options. Stainless steel cookware is durable, doesn't leach chemicals into food at normal cooking temperatures, and lasts for decades. Cast iron is another excellent choice, particularly for higher heat cooking, and it has the additional benefit of contributing a small amount of dietary iron to your food, which can be helpful for some older adults. Carbon steel, ceramic-coated cookware, and enameled cast iron are also reasonable alternatives. Each has its own learning curve, but none of them release the compounds we've been discussing. Fourth, if you do choose to keep using newer nonstick cookware, follow a few simple rules. Never preheat an empty nonstick pan on high heat. Always have food, oil, or water in the pan before turning on the heat. Cook on medium or medium-low settings rather than high. Use wooden, silicone, or plastic utensils rather than metal, which can scratch the surface. And replace the pan at the first sign of damage rather than trying to extend its life. Fifth, ventilate while you cook. Turn on your range hood or open a window. This is good practice for any cooking, but particularly so if you're using non-stick at higher temperatures, because it removes any aerosolized compounds from the air you're breathing. None of these changes require dramatic expense. A good stainless steel skillet can last you 20 or 30 years. Cast iron pans are often passed down through generations. The cost of cookware spread over its actual lifespan is genuinely modest. Now let's turn to the second category, which in my view affects even more households than the cookware question, because plastic storage containers have become so universal that almost nobody thinks about them. The concern here centers on two main groups of chemical compounds. The first is bisphenols, including bisphenol A, commonly called BPA, and related compounds like BPS and BPF. The second is phthalates, a family of chemicals used to make certain plastics flexible. Both of these are categorized in scientific literature as endocrine-disrupting compounds. That means they can interfere with the body's hormone signaling systems. And research over the past 2 decades has built a substantial body of evidence linking exposure to these compounds with cardiovascular effects, including elevated blood pressure, changes in heart rhythm, and increased markers of vascular inflammation. A 2012 study, published in the Journal of the American Medical Association, found that Adults with higher urinary BPA levels had a meaningfully increased risk of cardiovascular disease compared to those with lower levels. A 2020 study in the journal Hypertension, conducted by researchers at NYU School of Medicine, estimated that phthalate exposure was associated with thousands of premature cardiovascular-related events per year in the United States population alone. Biologically, these compounds can migrate from certain plastics into food, especially when exposed to heat, fatty, or acidic foods, or if the plastic has physically degraded over time. When you microwave leftovers in a plastic container, you're exposing that plastic to heat. When you pour hot pasta sauce into a plastic container for storage, you're combining heat with acid. When you've been washing and reusing the same container for years, the surface has likely developed microscopic cracks that release small particles, including what researchers now call microplastics. Microplastics are a more recent area of research, and the findings are genuinely sobering. A study published in 2024 in the New England Journal of Medicine indicated the presence of microplastic and nanoplastic particles in human arterial plaque, the type associated with cardiovascular disease. Researchers in the study observed a correlation between measurable plastic particles in arterial tissue and a higher rate of cardiovascular events. This is one study, and the field is still developing, but it represents one of the first direct observations of plastic particles inside human cardiovascular tissue with associated clinical outcomes. To be clear, no single study proves causation on its own. The body of evidence is still being built, but the direction of the research and the biological plausibility of the mechanisms is strong enough that taking practical precautions now is reasonable, particularly for adults over 60 whose cardiovascular reserves are already narrower than they were 30 years ago. Let me give you the same kind of practical framework I gave you for cookware, because vague warnings rarely change behavior. First, audit your plastic containers. Look at each one. If you see cloudiness, warping, deep scratches, staining that won't wash out, or any visible degradation, that container has reached the end of its safe use. Recycle it where possible and replace it. Second, identify your usage habits. The most important change you can make today without spending a single dollar is to stop microwaving food in plastic containers. Even containers labeled microwave safe are simply tested to not melt or visibly deform. That label does not mean nothing leaches into your food. When you reheat leftovers, transfer them to a glass or ceramic dish first. The extra 30 seconds is genuinely worth it. Third, avoid storing hot food in plastic. Let leftovers cool to roughly room temperature before transferring them to a plastic container, if you're using plastic at all. Hot food accelerates the migration of compounds from plastic into your food. Fourth, be especially cautious with acidic and fatty foods. Tomato-based sauces, citrus marinades, vinegar dressings, and oily leftovers all increase the leaching of chemical compounds from plastic surfaces. These foods are better stored in glass. Fifth, gradually transition toward glass and stainless steel storage. Mason jars, glass food storage containers with silicone or plastic lids that don't directly touch the food, and stainless steel containers are all excellent alternatives. You don't need to replace everything tomorrow. Start with the containers you use for hot or acidic foods and replace others over time as they wear out. Sixth, never put plastic containers in the dishwasher unless they're specifically rated for it, and even then, place them on the top rack only. The high heat of the dishwasher cycle accelerates plastic degradation, which means the next time you use that container, more compounds can migrate into your food. A small note worth mentioning. Some of the most useful plastic items in your kitchen are not storage containers at all. They are bottle caps, the inside coatings of certain canned foods, plastic wrap, and the trays that meat and produce come on at the grocery store. You can't avoid all plastic exposure, and that isn't the goal. The goal is to reduce the avoidable exposures, particularly the ones involving heat, and let your body handle the rest. If you have a moment, share this video with someone in your family. The kitchen habits we're talking about are often handed down from one generation to the next, and the people who would benefit most from this information are sometimes the ones who learned to cook decades before any of this research existed. I want to close with something important, because I don't want anyone watching this to walk away anxious or feeling like they've been doing something terribly wrong for years. The truth is that no single factor determines cardiovascular health. Genetics matter, blood pressure matters, cholesterol matters, activity level, sleep, stress, and what you eat all matter enormously. Cookware and food storage are one piece of a larger picture. They are not the whole picture, and they should not become a source of guilt or fear. What this research gives us is simply a more complete map. For decades, the conversation about heart health stopped at the edge of the plate. Now we know that the journey of food from the stove to your bloodstream includes a few more steps than we used to talk about. And some of those steps can be made safer with very small, very practical changes. After this video, focus on these 3 key actions. Check your non-stick pans for damage and replace any show and wear. Avoid microwaving food in plastic. Instead, use glass or ceramic dishes for reheating. Allow hot food to cool before storage, and opt for glass containers for acidic or oily items. These 3 changes alone reduce a meaningful percentage of the avoidable exposure most households experience, and they cost almost nothing to implement. For adults over 60, this matters slightly more than it does for younger adults, because the cardiovascular system has already been doing its job for a long time, and the margin for adding unnecessary inflammation is thinner. But the body is genuinely resilient. Reducing exposure today still makes a meaningful difference, even if you've been cooking the same way for 50 years. What's the one change you're going to make this week? Tell me in the comments. I read every reply, and your answers help shape what I cover next. Everything we discussed today is general health education, not personalized medical advice. Your specific situation should always be evaluated by your own doctor. If today's video was useful to you, please consider subscribing. We're here every week with honest, evidence-based health information for adults over 60. And if you know someone whose kitchen has been operating on autopilot for decades, please share this video with them. They may not have heard any of this before. Take good care of yourself, and see you in the next video.